G'day guys, this is Adam Cogan from SSW TV and I am here live at NDC Sydney and I am very lucky because I have Kristy Sachse here. How are you, Kristy?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. And you have the most fascinating title of a talk I've seen, Design Ops.
Yep.
Did you invent that? What is that?
Well, it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke because I was hearing a lot of developers talking about DevOps and totally excluding the whole design process. So I started calling it Design Ops, but then after a little bit of research, I realized that actually Design Ops is a thing. But generally when people talk about it, they talk about how to do design faster. So I'm talking more about how do developers and designers build things together faster.
Right. And how do we get ideas out faster?
The best way to do that is to work collaboratively and to do a few activities like injecting design thinking into the delivery process to ensure that things are moving quickly and then getting them out to the users as quickly as possible.
So don't we do that already? Or what are we doing wrong today?
What we're doing right now is, well, not everybody, but some people spend about 3 to 6 months doing research up front. And then they hand a whole bunch of ideas over to developers and then they build them and then they release all of those ideas, or they could be releasing them iteratively, but it's still very much waterfall. So what I'd like to do is just focus on one feature, get that idea measured and tested and prototyped, give that to the developers for building, and then releasing it into the live environment as quickly as possible so that we can then measure it to see if it's adding value.
Right. So I spend most of my time dealing with developers and I work with a backlog. I put it through build and deploy. I hear some feedback and I put good feedback into the backlog and I just do that. Mm-hmm. Are you talking about a bigger process than that?
Yeah, there is a bigger process. I'll just show an example here. So this is the life cycle of an idea. Okay. And essentially it starts off with organizational framing. So this is taking a step back. We're not even thinking about products at this stage. We're thinking about where does that company want to be? And how far away are they? What are the things, the activities they can do so they can get to where their goals are?
What's an example?
So an example is we might want to improve the way our employees submit a leave request. We might find out that that's really difficult and it's like people are not enjoying their lives because they don't know how to do these things, like those sorts of activities. So we find out what all
that doesn't live on the normal backlog. That's another backlog.
Yeah, these are just ideas at this stage. It is just, these are things that we could be taking into consideration. Right. And then based on all the research we did, where perhaps this is costing you a lot, or perhaps you're holding on to employees is quite difficult because they're having a horrible time. Maybe there's things we can do to make their life better at work. Those kind of activities, things to listen to. And then the customers will often go, okay, well, I think this is where we want to go. And at that stage, then we start talking about the double diamond and exploding that.
Is that product strategy?
Yeah, the product strategy is the double diamond, and that's divergent and convergent thinking. So first of all, you have an idea and you explode at all of the different ways that idea could be solved. Then you pick that one idea out of all the ways that you could solve that problem. You pick the one that you do want to solve, the one that would be the best one to solve, and then you start turning it into a prototype. So at that middle stage, we start, how do we solve that problem with a digital solution? Do we need to build a prototype and then test that prototype? So you want to do a lot of that thinking before you get into delivery. And then once you've tested that prototype, so that's that yes and no functionality, it goes and we've agreed that this is the right product to build. It's only then do we start breaking it up and turning it into stories that go in the backlog.
So that's the backlog I live in.
Yes.
Live in that, and then the delivery. So you basically made that.
Exactly. And the entire process here should be inclusive of designers and developers. You don't want to just be engaging developers at the delivery stage. Developers have a lot of knowledge that they can be bringing to the product strategy phase. This is the best way we could do it, or have you thought about this product? So they really give it that well-rounded solution. So you definitely don't want to be handing things over this wall. You want to be inclusive from beginning to end.
Right. So that the feedback at the very end where it says in market review.
Yep.
When I got you several hours ago and I showed you the app that we built for NDC,
yep.
You said, how are you collecting feedback?
Yeah.
And I go, well, nothing official.
Yep.
And you said, no, there's points that you should have to collect feedback.
Yep.
And then I went and got a little bit of feedback. So pull up the email I just sent. And that is that the typical, because I wasn't exactly sure what you meant,
Yep.
but is that a typical way? So this is the feedback from the last few people that have installed it. And then we said, all right, great. How did you find the app? Give us a mark out of 10.
Yep.
And then what was your experience with doing the tech quiz?
Yep.
Give us a mark out of 10 and give us any comments. Is that like typical of what you were meaning?
Yeah, I mean, normally it always starts with analytics. I find out are people using the product or the feature that we just released. It's really important to only release one feature at a time so that you can actually really narrow in on that one feature that you've released so it doesn't confuse you with. You don't get confused with all the other features because your app or your product might be doing very well, but it's hard to find out what it is that is not doing well if you release everything at the same time. So I usually release iteratively and I keep an eye on it. I use analytics to measure it. If I find out that people aren't using a product, I'll go out and I'll find out why. What is it that makes you not want, or if they download the app, then they don't use it. These are the sorts of questions you can have those conversations with them. So yeah, it's always based on analytics and then I back it up with face-to-face conversations.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it's people, stuff, and stats.
Yeah.
So in this case, I could probably guess that the tech quiz has lower ratings than the other. When I then go, all right, that should be our priority. Let's make the tech quiz more friendly to use or less intimidating or whatever we do. Do I then just start a new quiz and you compare, or do you put records in here showing, all right, there's been a change to this section?
Yeah, I probably would. If one person said I didn't like the quiz, it'd be something it's worth listening to, but you would want to make sure that there's a little bit more data than that. Like a lot of people are saying that the quiz was difficult to use. Like I wouldn't react straight away. But yeah, you would adjust. If everyone was saying that it would be better if the quiz was like this, you would add that story to the backlog, bring it into planning. And so for the next, you can make a decision. Is this a high priority for you to improve the quiz, or is it better to do another feature? Generally, it's better to improve what you have rather than to keep adding sort of product or features that aren't dazzling the customer. So yeah, you would add that back into the backlog to be addressed for the next sprint.
And when you're doing it for real, like obviously I just did this very quickly just to get the feel of it, and also it sounded like an awesome idea when you suggested it. Do you just do something as basic as I just copy and pasted that off Excel? Yeah. Is that how you do it, or do you have a more sophisticated way of doing this?
You can use paid tools. I like to use Trello, which is kind of a weird tool to be using, but it actually has some great features. You can have the columns as the questions and then the responses as a card, and you can add tags to that card. Was it positive? Was it negative? And then you can filter that as well. So it's fairly cheap and it's an easy way to do it.
And Trello also has a voting extension.
They do, exactly. So you can use it any tool. I try to do things as cheaply as possible. Yes. So Excel spreadsheets, Trello, that sort of thing works, but you can pay for things as well.
So when you got that feedback in your Trello board or your Excel spreadsheet, and you work on a major feature and you ship that, do you continue that Trello thing or you start afresh with a new one?
Every question, you would have to work it out. You don't want that Trello board to be out of control, so you would have to start the life of a product. If you were doing an Excel, you could add a new tab, or perhaps you're just making a slight tweak, then you add another column for that specific question. But yeah.
So when you make a decision, let's just say like on this NDC app that we made, and I say, look, I think this tab should be the first tab. Like I make a UI decision. Do you make those decisions just based on your wealth of experience, or talk to your designers and make that decision? Or do you say, hey, we have to get more stats on it? Or do you take a whole different step and do research on? Yeah,
I think these days designers need to be coaches. The experts are actually the product owner and the users of that product. So
not all product owners.
And so you have to just help them and guide them. I don't think it's the role of the designer to say this is how we're going to do it. You can definitely have the experience to do all of the research and help the product owner to make the decisions questions based on all the knowledge that you're giving to them.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think it's the role of the designer to say this is how it's going to be. We're more coaches these days than sort of dictators.
Fair enough. So when I built this, like the order was, I knew that I wanted to build something for NDC. I sit with the designer and I sketch something on paper, and then he does it in Photoshop, or in this case, he was using Sketch, and then he pushes it out to Zeppelin, and then I install this on my phone and give him a few more changes.
Yep.
Then I say, Devs, quick, hurry, now I need it coded up.
Yeah.
Is that a process you use?
It's a little bit different. What I like to do is do the research, present that information. We then we know we're going to be working on the right idea that we want to solve. We do a design studio, which we do a Crazy 8 session. So Crazy 8's...
Sorry, what's design studio?
A design studio is where you pull in some customers and the product owner and main stakeholders to get together, say, this is the problem we're trying to solve. What are some ways that we could solve this? And you just everyone sketches on pieces of paper. Then we share our ideas, and we all sort of vote on what we think would work best. And it's only at that stage that you then move into prototyping, where you might use the Sketch or the XDs or something like that. Once I have a design fleshed out, before I go to prototyping, I then pin that design up on the wall. So I have an example of that here.
You turn it from just digital into physical.
Yeah, I do work in a lot of physical. I have a digital backlog that I also mirror with a user journey that is on the wall.
Sorry, is that a user journey I'm looking at?
I'll actually show you that in a second. This is just an example of the design where we get the developers. Before you start testing the prototype, you get the designers, the developers, the copywriters, everyone that's involved in the project. You pin up your picture on the wall and you say, this is what the vision is for this, based on, the design studio that we just did. This is what it will end up looking like. Is everyone happy with this? Can we all add what needs to occur for this to happen? This is a great thing because it's a really well thought out concept, and those ideas then move into the acceptance criteria. It also means that one person isn't responsible for writing acceptance criteria. We can all contribute to that and add what we bring to the team to that acceptance criteria. It's also good because in the definition of done, when you say, does the product look like we agreed it would look like? Does it look like what we put up on the wall? It should, because we've all seen it and we've all spoken about it. We've all agreed that this is what the product will look like. And because it's up on the wall, there's no mistaking of, I didn't realize it had to look like that. So there's a lot of benefits to this wall. Another thing that I
just noticed a small thing.
Yep.
I thought, gee, I should have done that. That would have been more collaborative and get more ideas in quickly. You didn't just take screenshots and put it up. I see the hands in there as well. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, it's just a little bit of fancy. Just put inside an image of that and then overlaid just to give the vibe and to create the feeling of how this product's going to be used.
I like it.
If you look at where someone's thumb is, they're always down the bottom. So you can do it both ways. You don't always. I do it both ways. I would have it outside of a product and then inside, or a device and then inside a device as well. So that's one way to get the designers and developers on board when it comes to discovery and creating stories.
So the notes underneath, are they just new ideas? Are they little adjustments to what they're seeing, or are they an idea that you might, there's a whole new idea, I'm going to measure that from idea to
well, this would be, for this screen, what are all the things that we need to take into consideration for this to occur? So the developers will say, well, we need to do this with some sort of database or something or other, or we need to pull in this API. And then they can also start talking about, well, what happens when you click this? What sort of transitions are we going to do? What hover states? What are the active states? Those sorts of questions. Because you want to have those conversations before you start building, not during build, because that's going to slow you down. And the whole purpose is to get things out faster. So you want to get rid of all of those barriers to get those ideas out faster. So this sort of thing does speed it up.
But that's not a journey map. That's just printouts.
That is not a journey map. So And this is another example of the same thing. And you can see that this one's outside of the device and there's a lot of notes and people are contributing to it a lot. So this is a lot more mature, but this is the same thing where you put the designs up and everyone talks about what happens when you click on this and how are we going to get that data? Where is that information coming from? So it's really collaborative. Okay. Everyone contributes to it. And this information helps to create the acceptance criteria that goes in the backlog. And it's also something that we can measure back on when we're looking at our definition of done. But for a user journey, most designers will have some sort of user journey. So this is even before that. Is this an earlier step before the screens are done, is it? Yeah. And this is a living thing that just evolves as the product does. So if you had a really small user journey where we're just looking at login right now, you might just have a few features there, and then as the product evolves and the backlog evolves, you evolve that user journey. And then during the kick or the stand-up during the day, we can all stand around this and get some sort of idea of what we're trying to achieve and how far we are away from achieving it. The problem with backlogs is that they're not linear. You do the highest value item first, and that can be confusing sometimes because you're like, have we done everything we needed to do to have the beginning to the end? So if you can somehow map your backlog to a user journey, and it's a really simple process. You just have the features and you have a few post-its that have, say, the person who's working on the product or that feature, what they're working on. And during stand-up, you put those little post-its there. It's fun as well, which is great. And when it's completed, you have another post-it, which is this tick. And then if there's anything that's blocked, we can discuss that as well. And it's a very interactive, engaging, fun way of making sure that there's no blockers and that we understand what we're trying to achieve. Perfect for co-located teams, but yes. What about remote teams? For remote teams, what I will do is I take a photo of it beforehand, and if we were using it on Teams, I would have it, or whatever you're talking about, have it up, and you can draw on it there, and we can all collaborate and draw on it at the same time. So, and then I would just come back and make sure I move the post-its as well. Okay. Now, what does it look like if you add a new idea, new feature, and it's unsuccessful? Yeah, you have to be pretty brave. If your ideas aren't successful, it's, do the best. You find out why it's unsuccessful and try and fix that. But if at the end of the day, it's just because someone else is doing it better or people just don't want that idea, it's better to be brave and pull the plug on that idea rather than just continually throwing money at it. You really need to look at what it is that you can provide that nobody else is providing, because people are generally, they're not going to want to do double handling of information. They're only going to use the app that they've already downloaded or whatever it is. So what is your difference? So if you're not offering a difference, and you're not better than your competitor, then perhaps stop chasing that dream. Right, okay. So I might finish off with two more questions. How do you, what set of tools do you use? Do you, I assume Photoshop is core? I use Sketch. I find that that's a great tool. I think that's Mac only. That is Mac only. So if you wanted to use something that was for PC, you would use XD, which is great on Mac as well. XD is actually a great product. Figma's good as well. Figma's great for collaboration. You can both work on the same file at the same time. Right. And I also like Zeppelin and InVision for sending my digital designs to the developers so that they can get all the style sheets and the paddings. We use Zeppelin for this mobile app. It was so good. It's all working on my phone. I haven't talked to a developer yet. Yeah, the old days of PDFs and things, they're all gone. So everything's a lot faster now, which is great. So you should be able to get those ideas out quick. You didn't mention Balsamic, the storyboarding type of tools. Yeah, I find that on a lean project just adds an unnecessary step, especially when we're talking about small features. If I'm just doing the login screen, it's not a lot of time for me to design that. So we will do that in the design studio with pen and paper, and then I can take that straight to high fidelity, which is a design with color, and that's what that product should actually look like. And then we can actually test that. If you do wireframe, you have to test it. Then you add color, you need to test it again. And I think that just delays the getting that idea out into the public.
Okay, so you just go from handwritten to high fidelity, Photoshop, whatever.
Correct.
Oh, cool. And last one. You got a bunch of, design graduates from university. How do you spot a good one from that? How do you test? What do you do?
I'm always looking for someone that loves learning. So that's my first thing. We'll go to the grad shows and we'll check out what that person's producing. We'll have a chat to them, see if they're the right fit to the team, because that person might be awesome, but if they don't work well within the team, or that we don't think they'll work out, then we don't want to. We've got a really great team at the moment. We want to keep we're hiring people that are going to add value and add to that culture. So these are the things we're looking out for. So we want to see that you're excelling at your craft, but we also want to see that you want to constantly learn as well.
Right. Okay. And you put these. This design ops is essentially getting a designer and integrating them into the Scrum team, so they're a full-time member of the Scrum team.
We are. It depends. I have to keep an eye on the velocity. There's no point me spending a lot of hours on designing things if some of the delivery things are starting to slow down. So as a designer, it is your job to look on the backlog and ensure that your velocity, what you're producing, is paced well with what the delivery people are creating. You don't want to be designing a whole bunch of stories and spending the time for those stories if they'll never be built.
Well, this has been an awesome chat. Thanks, Kristy.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's so much to learn, and this is really important. And thank you for helping our process so that we're getting more and more tangible feedback.
Fantastic.
It's been fantastic. So this is Adam Cogan signing off for SSW TV.